Society for Scholarly Dialogue. I'm Scott Meyer. I am pleased to welcome you all here. So it's nice to see a blend of people from the campus and people from the community. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing a colleague I've known for many years, Dr. Stephanie Halter, who has received her doctorate from the University of New Hampshire in sociology with a specialty area in criminal justice, is an assistant professor in our Department of Criminal Justice, and she's going to present for us tonight a provocative topic that we hope will stimulate a lot of discussion: sex offenders, myths, policies, and treatment options. And Steph, would you prefer that people hold their questions till the end, or if something comes up, would you prefer they?
Something comes up, I don't know.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Steph.
Well, thanks. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I really wanted to just first start off by saying that I really admire you coming out for a topic such as this and engaging in dialogue. As I believe this topic is really challenging, as I mentioned to Kathy earlier, to think really rationally about this topic. I think it's hard for people to do, but I also do think it's really necessary to do if we really want to prevent and reduce child sexual abuse and sexual assaults in our community. So I think it's really necessary. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background knowledge about some of these crimes. But in recent years, I think we've seen really unprecedented public outcry regarding child sexual abuse and public anger towards sex offenders especially. And I can really understand this anger, and I'm sure many of you can as well. As rape and child molestation are really horrific crimes with really long-standing consequences for victims, right, and family members and communities. So there really are some long-standing consequences. However, the public has a lot of misperceptions about sex crimes and the nature of sex offenders. And some of these misperceptions have actually resulted in some pretty failed policies by many accounts of criminologists. And these misperceptions have been created, I think, by the sensationalizing media that we have that really focuses on some kind of abnormal or what a lot of criminologists actually call celebrated cases. So they tend to focus on really abnormal cases, and we get a distorted view of what the norm is for child sexual abuse cases and sex crimes. And I think really what adds to this problem is that wannabe re-elected politicians use this tough-on-crime platform then to advocate for really tough kind of crime laws against sex offenders to get re-elected because it is a popular agenda. Right? So we see this continuing to this day. So these misperceptions get created by the media, and then politicians use those misperceptions to get re-elected. So, and unfortunately, and this has really come to a head, I think, in our discipline, is that in America today, a lot of our crime policies that we have tend to be based on what people think should work to control crime, rather than what scientific evidence really shows works to reduce crime. And what we know from empirical scientific evidence. Well, this is especially true, I think, for sex crimes, right, and for sex offender policies. As the celebrated cases that we're going to talk about, a few of those tonight, these are often particularly heinous, right? And the public reacts with disgust and anger and outrage. And we've seen that a lot. So a couple of examples. Some of these cases you might be familiar with. Adam Walsh was a really common case that you guys remember the Adam Walsh case? In 1981, he was actually abducted from Sears shopping mall store. He was with his mother. She left him by the video game for 7 minutes, was just a few aisles away, and when she came back, he was gone. They found his head, which was disconnected from his body, in a canal. So it was really horrific for this family, right? And it's really led to a lot of, really influenced a lot of our policies that we have today, particularly because Adam Walsh's father became these types of offenders. And so this case is really a very well-known case, and I think it's become kind of a signpost for these types of crimes. And this actually led to the creation of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. John Walsh, actually, his advocacy led to the creation of that agency. And today, I think I just heard on the news the other day that he just did his 1,000th show of America's Most Wanted, which he's been the host of for many years. And they just passed in 2006 the Adam Walsh Act, which we'll talk a little bit about some of the consequences possibly of that act. But Polly Klaas is the next one that I would talk about. She was having a sleepover in her home with actually two of her friends. Somebody broke into her house at 10:30 at night. They were in her bedroom, and when she went to go get sleeping bags for her and her friends, there was somebody in her room with a knife, tied the other girls up, and told them to count to 1,000, and then slipped out of the house with Polly. She wasn't ever to be seen again. They did find her body in a shallow grave, but the motivation there was assumed to be that she was molested and strangled. I think his name was Richard Davis, who they did catch. He's now on death row in California. Megan Kanka's case is a really important one for sex offender policies. She was raped and murdered by Jesse Timon Dacus, I think is his name. He was a repeat violent sex offender. He moved into the house across the street from her, and her parents didn't know. He was living with two other repeat sex offenders, other people who had been released from prison for sex offense. And she was murdered, kidnapped, raped, and murdered by this violent sex offender. And so Megan's parents really became advocates for this issue for child victims. And they went to their state, and I think very quickly at this point they got a law passed called Megan's Law, which passed actually in New Jersey. So it started as a state law, and then later came a federal law. Jacob Wetterling, his case is actually really important as well, mostly because his mother, Patty, has been really active as well in advocating for child victim issues. He was kidnapped while bicycling home from the store with his brother and a friend. An armed gunman stopped them on the road, told all the kids to ditch their bikes. Then he said, asked them their ages, and told the younger kids to go, and took Jacob because he was a little bit older than the other two boys. His body was never found, but that case was in Minnesota. But it was assumed that case was never really solved at all. It was assumed that it was a sex offender, the motivation was for sex crime, and that he was killed. The last one, I think you might remember, Jessica Lunsford, she's the cutest little thing. She was 9 years old when she was kidnapped, raped and murdered by a registered sex offender who lived in her neighborhood. I think it was a trailer park in Florida. And he actually kidnapped her, raped her several times, kept her for the weekend, told her that he was going to bring her home, and asked her to get inside a black garbage bag, like a trash bag, tied her up, and willingly got her to go in there because he told her he was going to take her home. And then he didn't, clearly. He actually buried her alive. So really horrific crime for Jessica. And so that actually led to the creation of Jessica's law being passed in Florida, which many states have now adopted, which increased the mandates against child sex offenders and asked for lifetime electronic monitoring for sex offenders. Right? So that's how a lot of the laws that we actually have today came about, was because of these types of cases.